I was just waiting for the phone call to stop ringing. It started just as I was about to press the button, and I didn't want it in the background to distract me and not you either. So here we are on the last of this week's talks on Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 to 10. And I want to think about the phrase in verse 10 that appears there, where it describes that Abraham is looking forward to a city with foundations. I think that's a great phrase, and I just want to think about it for a bit. Now, the contrast that the writer is making is a straightforward one. Abraham had left a city at God's call, followed him, and then had found himself in the land of Canaan. But there he had no permanent lodging place, and he spent the rest of his life living in a tent. So the contrast is there, and he looks ahead, by contrast, to a city with foundations. Now, there are hints throughout the Bible of a heavenly city. You find one, for instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, where the city of Jerusalem becomes the focus for the world, and for the world, the source of the world's peace. So it's there, but the clearest is in Revelation chapter 21 and 22, of course, right at the end of the Bible, where the world is brought to an end as we know it and completely renewed. And then it says that the heavenly city came down from heaven to earth. Now, there are several features within that make us see how good and permanent it is. But the real center of it is that God is there, and that's the thing that makes it heavenly. So in chapter 21, verse 3, it says that God's dwelling place is now amongst people again. That's the great hope of the Bible, God with us. And it says God himself will be with them and will be their God. The old order of things will pass away, so things like death and mourning and crying and pain are gone. And then in the middle of chapter 21, the dimensions of the city are mentioned. It's a huge cube, and the dimensions are 1,400 miles each way. So it's evidently not a physical picture that we're being given here. The reason it's spelled out like that is that the only other cube in the Bible is found in the Old Testament in the description of the temple. The temple itself had two central rooms, the one where the priests went, and the other, the most holy place, was where God dwelled, and no one could go. Basically, no one. The high priest could go just once a year. Now, that room where the ark was, where God dwelled, was a cube. And so what John is doing is picturing heaven as the place where God dwelled, the most holy place. And that's where we will be as well. So that's why he pictures it that way. And then in chapter 22, the city is described again. And it's a picture where the water of life flows. And the tree of life, from which we'd previously been cut off, is there giving healing to the nations. And the throne of God is there, it says. The Lamb is there. And his servants will serve him, and they will see his face. So those three pictures of the heavenly city essentially make it heavenly because God is there, and we are with him. And that's what makes it a city with foundations. God is the architect. That's the word from which we get technician. So he's the skilled builder of it. He's the one who's put it together. And he is there. And the old order is gone. And we reign with him forever. By contrast, everything that we have here is not permanent. We like to think that things are long-lasting and that we shall be long-lasting. But the Bible always describes our lives as weak and frail. In James chapter 4, James challenges us with this. He says, what is your life? You're just a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. And not just ourselves, not just we are impermanent, but everything we have is impermanent. It has no solid foundation to it. The coronavirus has seen to that, hasn't it? Whilst most of us have not been affected by the illness itself, the consequences of it are that our economic and social system has been shaken to the core. Nothing that we have is permanent or solid. We need foundations to life. Or as it says in Hebrews 12, we need something that cannot be shaken. It's in the context of him saying, we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. That's what we need. We need something that's not going to be affected by the earthquakes and the tides of life. You can't build security on something you can lose. Well, Abraham, if you look at his life, there was nothing permanent about his life. Everything was insecure. He was called from the city to a life of insecurity. And so how did he do that? How did he manage it? How did he go to the place without knowing where he was going? How did he spend his whole life as a nomad? Well, it's because he drew strength from the vision of heaven, strength from the vision of God that he had. It was that called him forward, that strengthened him. It was that was his secure foundation in life. And that's what we're called to as well. A life, as I said in an earlier talk, is like a journey. And we are heading towards a goal, and we need to take strength from that goal. I suppose we do that in a very minor way. If you go, for instance, for a very long walk, a hike across the mountainsides and countryside, and you know that at the end there's going to be a hot bath, a meal, and a warm welcome. It's that keeps you going. That's perhaps a very insignificant way of thinking about it, but actually the heavenly vision that we have is to do that for us, that we are heading towards God himself, towards something with real foundations and something that we can never lose. So think about that today. Be strengthened by it. On Sunday, we are going a bit further on into Hebrews 11, from Hebrews 11 verse 11, and therefore next week's Fireside Chats will draw from those verses. So hope to see you then. Bye for now.